Hi, I'm Paul Trudelle,
And I'm Kira Domratchev.
and you're listening to Trudelle Estates, and welcome to episode number 541, being podcast today from sunny South Beach, Miami. Actually, that's not right. Beautiful downtown Toronto. How are you, Kira?
I'm good. How are you, Paul?
Very good, thanks. We thought we'd podcast today on a recent Court of Appeal decision that deals with the Trustee Act and the limitation period set out in the Trustee Act. And maybe we can talk a bit about that. It's the case of Levesque and Crampton, and we'll put the link to that up on our website. But it deals with the limitation period set out in the Trustee Act with respect to claims against an estate and the perhaps draconian, harsh results that can arise from an application of that limitation period. So maybe we can talk a bit about the facts of the case and then the limitation periods that apply.
So this deals with a case where the plaintiff, Raymond Levesque Jr., alleged he was sexually assaulted by a priest, Father Dale Crampton, in 1976. The plaintiff was 12 years old at the time. Father Crampton pleaded guilty to indecent assault, and on appeal to the Ontario Court of Appeal, he was sentenced to 8 months imprisonment. This was back in 1987. Father Crampton died in 2010, and subsequently in 2013, Mr. Levesque and his family brought an action against his estate and the Roman Catholic Episcopal Corporation of Ottawa, or RCECO for short, claiming that RCECO was vicariously liable for Father Crampton's conduct and breached independent duties that were owed to Mr. Levesque.
Right. So the claim started by Mr. Levesque was started in 2013. There was a cross-claim made by Roman Catholic Church against the estate in 2014.
Yes.
However, the deceased died in 2010.
That's right. In 2015, Mr. Levesque and his family consented to an order dismissing their claim against Father Crampton's estate because it was barred by the 2-year limitation period that's set out in Section 38(3) of the Trustee Act. And of course, subsequent to that, the estate brought a motion to dismiss the cross-claim relying on the same section against RCECO.
Right. And at the motion level, the judge said that the limitation period set out in the Trustee Act didn't apply, or was trumped by the limitation period in the Limitations Act, and allowed the claim to continue and dismiss the motion for summary judgment. That was appealed to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal then had to grapple with the intersection between the limitation period set out in the Limitations Act and the limitation period set out in the Trustee Act. So maybe we can talk a bit about those limitation periods. Under the limitation period with respect to a cross-claim, you have 2 years in which to bring a defendant who's sued has 2 years to bring a cross-claim against joint tortfeasors under the Limitations Act. And the limitation period set out in the Limitations Act starts when the defendant is served with the plaintiff's claim. So that triggers the limitation period. Once the defendant is sued, they are then deemed to be aware of a potential cross-claim, and they have 2 years to bring that cross-claim. In this case, the Roman Catholic Church was within that 2-year period. However, the other limitation period that applies is under the Trustee Act,
Which is 2 years from the date of death, and that would have been 2010.
Right. So in this case, the Trustee Act under the Trustee Act, you can bring a claim for damages as a result of the actions of the deceased. But the limitation period is 2 years from the date of death. In this case, 2 years from the date of death would expire before the plaintiff even sued the Roman Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church said that it was harsh and unfair that their claim was barred, even though they hadn't even had notice of a possible claim and cross-claim.
That's right.
The Court of Appeal had to grapple with that and the harshness of the legislation. Under the Limitations Act, it applies to all actions unless they're specifically governed by any other limitation period. And those other limitation periods need to be listed in a schedule. The Trustee Act is one of those limitation periods that's on the schedule, and therefore overrides the limitation periods set out in the Limitations Act.
That's right.
The court also noted that with respect, it seems harsh, but in the common law, you couldn't bring a claim against the deceased person for wrongs or negligence. They died with the deceased. That was buried by the Trustee Act that allowed claims to be made against the deceased's act for wrongs during their lifetime. However, they, in balance or creating that right to go against an estate, they also put a cap on it or a limit on that, which is the 2-year limitation period.
That's right.
And the court felt that although the result was harsh, it was not as harsh as it would have been under the common law where you didn't have a claim at all. The court balanced the right of a party to sue in the deceased's estate with the right of a deceased estate to have some finality and certainty with respect to possible claims against it.
You know, if you didn't have the 2-year limitation period against an estate, then estate trustees would potentially be dealing with repercussions of claims brought beyond the 2-year period, you know, at a time when the estate would have been wound up, and then it would have been a consideration of what to do then.
Right. So this 2-year limitation period, it opens the door for claims against the estate, but it sets a time when that door closes. And the result may be harsh in a case like this, where the person making the cross claim didn't even know of the claim before the limitation period expired. However, that's something that was in the Court of Appeal decision. They looked at legislative history, and that was a concern that was made or raised when the Trustee Act was being reviewed. However, the legislatures decided that that result, the fact that claims will be barred after 2 years, was appropriate in the circumstances. So it's something to keep in mind when bringing a claim as against an estate. You have that 2-year limitation period. It's a problem when you don't even know about possible claims that you may have against an estate, but it's a real concern and something to keep in mind. For estate trustees, it's another defense or something in your quiver of ammunition or another shield that you could raise when faced with a claim. Consider when that claim is made and whether the Trustee Act will apply and to protect the estate.
That's exactly right.
I think that brings us to the end of this podcast. Thank you very much, Kira.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, and until next time, thank you for listening. If you have any comments or questions, please email us at webmaster@hollandhall.com or leave us a comment